Preparing. Okay, welcome. January 10, 2022, Bitcoin Design Guide Jam Session number 19, first one for this year. And so the usual thing we do here is review what we worked on since the last time we talked and then figure out what's next. And very special at this moment is that I think we're so close to wrapping up adding Lightning content to the guide. They're really just, so this was, what was it, like 6 months process? So before it was just on-chain Bitcoin, which I think that version of the guide was done in May or so. And then we figured out what to do next. We decided on Lightning, and then we did that for 6 months or so. And now we're pretty much at the end of this, which is really cool. And then we can figure out what's the next thing that we want to do, which is a really big discussion. And I think some of that discussion's already happened. Yeah, so Daniel, you posted a link here in the chat. So
yeah, just for those who maybe haven't been following so closely, this is kind of a GitHub issue where we've kept track of all the different pull requests and issues to update all the pages in the guide. So it's kind of a good place to see how we're doing, and it's looking good.
Okay,
I guess the big part that's left is the case studies, where we've kind of previously given examples of how you might design an app or what kind of components you might choose for it in terms of private key management schemes, etc. That has not yet been updated, but otherwise we're doing great.
Yeah, so there's currently only 2 pages outstanding, receiving Bitcoin, which Bosch created an issue for it that's already been reviewed by Stephen, Pav, and I believe. I just left a few comments, but that should be pretty much be able to wrap that up in the next week or so. And then transaction privacy, where we really need to check in with Johns. I haven't seen any updates on that one. And then the case studies, Daniel, as you mentioned, that's kind of a thing where we either say where we can tackle it now, or we can do some other cleanup stuff first. Because something that we also realized in this whole process is that the initial structure we had is kind of falling apart now because we came up with it when we had like 10 pages or so, or 20 or so. Now that we have 60 or something, it's just kind of a lot, where you look in the sidebar and it's just stuff. And another issue, if we look at the sidebar here, is that, I was looking at this earlier here, is that onboarding and payments have a very specific product focus, mobile Lightning wallets. And then private key management is kind of general, designing Bitcoin products kind of general. Case studies have their own product focus, and it's just not kind of not obvious, some of this stuff. And then in payments, we have things like coin selection, which also applies to other things. Transaction privacy also applies to various other pages. It's just kind of a bit messy. So that's a big task that we could figure out before we get into figuring out the case studies. David, how does that make sense so far as a newcomer?
Yeah, no, I think I understand what we're talking about. I haven't got a chance to read the full guide yet, so yeah. I wouldn't be the best person to talk about it on yet. But from just an outsider, everything is actually very intuitive, and it's great to read. Like,
yeah, it's a lot of stuff here. You're probably not the only person here who hasn't read the whole guide. It's a lot to keep up with, even when you work with this very closely. But yeah, I think big picture is that we can. I don't know what everybody else's thoughts are, but my perspective for what we do after Lightning would be we make it easier to find, easier to browse, easier to use, like more practical, more consistent. We beef up, we improve, right? We revise the writing, we revise the images, we create prototypes. We just add more depth to everything. That would be my, and practically apply it to things through the wallet improvement project in a big way. That would be my thought. But what's everybody else thinking so far?
Kind of wondering if maybe we should just get the case study stuff out of the way before we
Yeah.
do the guide reorg. I mean, it's so simple. I think the one that just jumps out as needing lightning content is going to be daily spending. So we could just kind of review that page, same as we've been doing with the other ones. Just give it a review to see what could be added to it.
Hmm.
And the same with the other ones, savings, upgradable, and shared account. I can't imagine those pages are going to need huge updates. With the savings account, I think this page talks about a multi-sig. Yeah, this is about a multi-sig. So, I mean, this probably doesn't really need a lot of lightning stuff if we're talking about a 2 of 3 multi-sig with external hardware keys. Same with the upgradable wallet. That's very much about turning something into a multi-key setup. So, I mean, I think we could probably just very quickly review and update the case studies and just call that done, and then move on to reorganizing the guide.
Yeah, I think that depends on the ambitions. We could. So if you look at some of these, the fidelity of some of these, like we've gotten way beyond, some of those wireframes in many of the other pages we've done. So we could do a very light lightning revision here for sure, or we could just do full-blown overhauls if you wanted to.
Yeah, I mean, might as well rebuild it all with the wallet UI kit. That'd be my first thought.
Or with something like upgradable account, we could also, kind of get rid of things like the home screen here and just focus on the unique flows that are particular to this kind of upgrading process or downgrading too. So we could also, get rid of some of this stuff here and just focus on those specific user flows.
Well, I do think it makes sense, Stephen, to at least create issues and review these pages, review the case studies, and kind of write down our thoughts for like, well, what does each of them need to just kind of, what would be the kind of minimum work to get them to kind of pass the lightning test, if you like. But then maybe before we actually kick off doing that work, I think it could be useful to have a little session on how would we like the guide to change in terms of structure or or ways of navigating. Because one thing I have been thinking about is, most people are very happy to kind of get to the price straight away. And I don't want to take the course. I just want to learn the learnings. And I've been thinking about this kind of quick start idea, right? If you land on the guide, and either if you're a designer or a developer with some design aspirations, I think it would be super useful to kind of give them here's a good place to start, right? Literally, like maybe it builds on the upgradable wallet, but refines that so that you can start with literally one design, if you like, but it's more the architecture that could then, as you grow as a developer or a designer, you can kind of, that you haven't started in the wrong place, both design-wise and technically. So, it could be a concept that starts out as a, mostly Lightning wallet, but has, the required pieces to go on chain, at a later date or something. Anyway, it's just my kind of concept that is not fleshed out at the moment at all, but like this kind of quick start thing, like, okay, I went to Bitcoin Design Guide. I found the kind of template, if you like, or the kind of the design kit, and off I went. I had a perfect starting point, which didn't lock me into, bad choices. That's sort of one idea I have how the structure could. I mean, it's not really changing the structure. It's more like pulling the strings into like a grab bag of like, okay, cool. If we direct everybody that wants to build a new wallet or design a new wallet to that place, we know that we have kind of given them a good place to start. That's a thought I have.
Very true, considering the use cases, the starting points that people come in at, what they're looking for. I mean, this was one of the, was also one concept, just highlighting those use cases as the primary thing that you see when you land on the guide, very practical. And then below that, having all those individual sections around design, technologies, whatnot. But yeah, that seems like it could be a big exploration.
Yeah, so maybe, I mean, there's still possibility to work on parallel tracks here. We're quite a few people now, and since most of the Lightning updates are done, maybe we can explore some of these things in parallel.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. So we can, some people wrap up the Lightning, then there's Lightning follow-up stuff that we kind of have to do. Then there's a bunch of small stuff. I know there are a bunch of things like maintenance things that have been adding up that I would like to just kind of take off. That's just boring routine stuff. And then kind of the more exciting things is the restructuring, like figuring out what this guide should feel like and look like and how it should work for people in a half a year or so, whenever we get there. Which is a pretty cool design challenge.
Mm-hmm.
So, cool. Where should we take this next? Should we go back to issues and roadmaps, these types of things?
Yeah, sure.
So here in my background here, if you can see it all the way, there's a list of the boring stuff that I mentioned earlier. Just some navigation reordering, adding some details and certain technical things, adding tips for visual formatting of addresses to the addresses page, replacing the mention of Glacier protocol with a more user-friendly multi-sig solution. That's all small stuff that anyone can just kind of take and tick off. And I think that might be kind of good stuff to do while we figure out what this next version of the guide will be. So if somebody wants to,
yeah, I can take
any of those topics.
I can take some boring issues.
Just one, this here fixed keyboard only navigation of the site, that's an accessibility issue.
Mm-hmm.
So you can navigate the whole thing with just a keyboard or a screen reader or so. Something I'd like to, it's very tedious, technical front-end dev thing.
Yeah, I can take a look at that.
I've been hoping for such a long time that somebody will just come in and take care of it, but nobody has.
Well, we can post about it in Slack and see if somebody wants to do it. I'd be willing to take a look at it too. I mean, I've had to do those kind of keyboard navigation websites. I mean, it's been a long time, but I'm familiar with the process of having to painstakingly go through every page with a keyboard until you get it right.
And I've reached out to a guy called Randy McMillan. He's trying to do push accessibility research, especially for blind people, I believe. And I wanted to see if maybe he's interested in working on a page around accessibility for the guide. I think that'd be a really cool thing to do this year also. And even better if we could also make it part of the wallet review project. And maybe also implement it. Let's say Bosch is working on SUS or so, that we also pay attention to that a little bit. I think that'd be a really good thing to do.
Yeah, that'd be a cool idea. Yeah, let's bring him in.
Yeah, I messaged him, hasn't replied yet, but I'll let you know. Something comes up. Do you guys just want to grab some of these? Should we talk through the case studies and what to do there while we're here? I don't have much else to talk about. If you want to, we can just talk. We can talk about whatever our big goals for the year, whatever you want to do. Or we
Yeah,
can
while
go
you're
through
talking, by the way, I'm just creating some issues for these case studies to review.
Perfect.
I already created them,
Oh, you
so just to make sure we don't overlap and
Okay,
spam.
I'll stop.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, if we want to talk about the case studies, I mean, the
So
daily spending one. Sorry, what were you going to say?
one thing that I was wondering is we have these personal finance things here, which talks about day-to-day spending. This type of wallet is good, or set up monthly budgeting, this and that. So we have these prototypes or archetypes of different products here, and that is something that we could also reflect in the case studies, which we kind of already do. But maybe if we rethink them, if we reapproach them, maybe we could find more ways to tie those things together.
Yeah, like I'm looking at this cash account daily spending, and it's really reminding me of stuff that I've seen in many other places in the guide. So, which may not be a bad thing, because I mean, a lot of the stuff we're talking about in here, like, you know, okay, here's what it should do. It needs to be able to create a wallet. You need to be able to import a wallet. You need to be able to send and receive funds. And so, like, for every other page in the guide, we've created these mock-ups of whatever particular flow we're talking about on that page. So it seems like we could just repurpose some of the flows that we're using elsewhere in the guide for this page, because I feel like this case study page is really just kind of taking all of the ideas that we talk about everywhere else in the guide and showing it all together. Right. So like if every other page on the guide is like, here's different user flows that might occur in your wallet or application, and maybe there's 15, 20 different possible user flows. The cash account daily spending page is like, these 5 or 7 flows are the ones that are the most important for this type of wallet. So I mean, it seems like it's just about bringing this page up to match whatever the other pages are.
I mean, it's true. Our onboarding and payments are basically this product.
Yeah. And this page here, it has links to all the different pages, a single key scheme with link, automatic cloud backup, so I think it's a matter of just making sure that everywhere where we mention a flow on this page, we're linking to somewhere else in the guide where they can get more information about it. Like it says, onboarding with as little friction as possible. That's just calling out to be linked to the onboarding section. And then, obviously we need to sprinkle in some lightning updates to this page and all of that.
Yeah, so we could potentially merge this with just onboarding and payments, and just that is the mega case study. Alternatively, if this could be merged with the wallet improvement project, so we could say, okay, here, if Moon is an example of this, here are some screenshots of what they do well, what they do poorly, and then another. So we merge it with external research that we do, real world products that are out there.
Yeah, one of the ideas that I suggested with the wallet improvement project is to actually, at the end of every cycle with every wallet, we do create like a standard type of case study where we would provide like things we did, what were the problems, how we solved them, and then maybe that can also be added to the case studies and maybe then combined, because I assume that all of these different wallets may have different types of goals that they want to provide. So perhaps Moon is a daily spending wallet, whereas some other wallets, one that comes to my mind is Zebedee. It's more like allowing you to get onboarded to Bitcoin and maybe play games. So, but that's also in a way a daily spending wallet. So I don't know how we would even categorize those, but I envision that at the end, hopefully at the end of the wallet improvement project, we will have like quite a few case studies that are really based on, hopefully interviews with users and things like that. But it's a big project, so I'm not sure if we will be able to deliver it for all. But yeah, discussion for maybe some other time. But just wanted to point out that I also plan to added case studies from wallet improvements there.
It's a good thing you bring that up, I think, because what I feel that we have in the guide today under the case studies chapter is actually more of kind of like reference designs. They're not, real cases. They are imaginary. But it's kind of also maybe where I'm trying to get to with this quick start thing. It's like, if you can have a really great reference design for these use cases, and you just fork the Figma file and you kind of 80% there, that's a really good resource, I think. And at the moment, there is a Figma file, but it's these kind of wireframe things. So if we were to upgrade that to, actual product fidelity, that'd be good. And then that Figma file combined with, I'm dreaming again, but like combined with some actual GitHub code repositories that actually also was like, okay, here's a bare bones mobile wallet repository. If you combine that with this Figma file, you have a product that you can start shaping. Of course, that's maybe a longer term goal and maybe outside of some of our skills here. But before that repository exists, I think I would like to see a list of like, well, here are the technical kind of things you would need to meet. Like you should support these BIPs, you probably want to use this kind of SDK, etc. But yeah, these are reference designs more.
I have a question. Since this is the first call that I'm on, who do you guys envision like kind of using the case studies? Who do you think is actually using them?
It's a very good question. We don't know who's using them, as we have no tracking on any part of the site. But I guess what I envisioned writing some of these in the beginning was that it was supposed to be a gathering, a starting point for someone who were trying to design a product for a specific use case. So if they were trying to design an easy-to-use wallet for people who wouldn't store that much value in it, it would be the kind of daily spending case where they wanted to go and pay in the store with it. So that was what they were designed for. Like, okay, start here. If you're building this kind of product, start here.
And they were not meant to be super in-depth, but more kind of an outline of this product, of why it exists, what it's good for, what it's not good for, what to pay attention to.
Makes sense. Mm-hmm. So it's supposed to have this sort of helicopter view as it is now?
Yeah, it wasn't trying to... The reason they were wireframes, for example, was that at the time I didn't feel like imposing any sort of design language. It was more about what components should this screen contain, or what flow would you probably have to go through, right? It was not about providing a ready-made designed product.
Can I just jump in on that? Just from sort of being an outsider and being someone that wants to build his own tipping wallet, it is actually really, really valuable the way it is laid out at the moment, I think, just because it gives me a perspective where I can see, these are the exact stages that we need to design for. And in fact, they're pretty much already designed, so we can just plug and play almost. But I do think what you were saying, Daniel, about having those actual sort of case studies would be valuable too, because it means you can see who else is on the market and what else they're doing. And so having both would probably be ideal, I think, but I do like the way you have the very minimal sort of way of showing it. And while you call it case studies, maybe where you change the name from case studies to something else. I think it is, but I do think it's really good.
I was just about to suggest that. I think that maybe, but of course open to full criticism, is that maybe it should be called user flows as opposed to case studies. And thanks to you guys who put the work in. But maybe possibly user flows. I don't know. Just throwing it out there.
No, I think I'm more and more open to the idea of renaming these, or who knows if we're even going to keep them in this form. But yeah, they are not necessarily case studies. They are reference designs, or like, but they're not also simply user flows, because they're a collection of user flows, right? They're a specific collection for a specific use case, and there are other collections for other use cases. So yeah, we should think about if there is a better name. Like, the simply changing it to reference designs makes sense, but they're also very bare bones, so they're not, don't feel great calling them like reference designs in that way.
Right now, but they can be less bare bones. One way I looked at them is that they tie a lot of things together. So if you look at private key management, there's like many individual techniques, and they just describe techniques. Then if we look at usage lifecycle or personal finance or common user flows, they all describe individual pieces. And then the case studies tie a lot of those things together into a product that ideally fits a very specific type of user that wants to do pretty specific things. It's like it takes all of those pieces and puts them in a nice product package. That's kind of how I looked at the case studies. Because sometimes when you look at an individual piece, let's say you look at, oh, external signers, okay, that's kind of cool, I understand that, but it still doesn't always tell you how that actually makes sense in an actual use case or product, specific product context, and the many different ways this technique can be used. And I think that becomes more clear when you look at it through the lens of those case studies.
Yeah, I agree. Like our entire guide is based on mobile, non-custodial Lightning wallets at this point. So adding basically like a page where we would outline all of the recommendations we give throughout the guide would make sense, and even make it in a way a checklist of some sort, which shouldn't be the checklist. It should just like be our recommendation that we recommend that designers might, want to look into this, that, and maybe just to have like a single page of all of our cool things that we discovered may be useful as well.
Maybe these are actually the starting point for these quick start guides that I've been thinking about. And maybe there's not just one. Maybe there's a quick start if you want to build these mobile only Lightning wallets. And there could be another quick start if you want to build something else. But the point of the quick start is that you collect the disparate parts from all over the guide into one page. It's like, okay, you don't actually have to read this whole guide. If you know what kind of product you're building, we pulled it together.
And then we also have to make sure there's a little bit of extra space for things like the merchant section, and who knows, maybe other expansions will happen this year. It's really cool. It's interesting how sometimes you just have to take, you only know what happens after the next step, once you actually take the first step. And you cannot come up with the final solution at the beginning. You have to do something, and then the next thing will become obvious. And I feel like we're in another situation like that, where half a year ago, we couldn't have anticipated what we should do next, but now we have a better sense for it.
Well, I'm not sure where we should go next, but at some point, I think sharing and discussing a bit of was it a FigJam file or a Figma file that you, Christoph, and many others had posted ideas to? I think that's an interesting discussion, but I'm not sure if that's for today or for another time. But that was kind of a brainstorm for what this year could bring, right?
Yeah, I think there's a little bit of difference between the guide and the
other projects
and the community. Okay, let me pull that up here. Here it is. Yeah, so that was some discussion between a few people around what we could do next. I don't think it's much that we. Yeah, Lightning apps. If Johns wants to, he might be interested in this whole Lightning app stuff. Because well, if we have Lightning and there are all these Lightning applications potentially popping up, then we might also want to provide guidance around those, like how you connect your wallet, how you approve transactions. Albi seems to be a good front runner in that regard, making lots of progress. And then the other thing is this whole thing about discussion around a reading group or a workshop. And so the idea there is that for the last year and a half, we just focused so much on adding content. And this kind of opens it up. So we could have a reading group that every week grabs one page or picks up one page and just talks about it and records it, and we put it on YouTube, and maybe we link to it from each page. So there's not just text, but there's a lively discussion happening. Another one could be a workshop where we do run a 1 week workshop at some point, and we just take people from the beginning to the end. So those are all, or the checklists for builders, where you can look at your wallet and you have like a bunch of questions that you can answer to check whether it lives up to certain expectations or guidelines. So those are all ways to make it a lot more practical, to put it out there. And those are just ideas, right? That's where we really have to talk to the users and figure out what they want to do or what they would like to see. David, from your experience now being new and looking into building things, what do you think? What would you appreciate?
Well,
to see?
I think by reading groups, do you mean like I noticed you did the Lightning book before? Because I sort of caught up a bit of it on YouTube, or there's several different videos, wasn't there? I watched some of them, but that type of thing, I find it quite interesting. I would definitely partake in it. I would be interested in learning as a group and just learning, like having like that sort of hive mind type thing. So yeah, that definitely would be cool. And all other stuff, it's a good question. Like I don't know, I'm happy to participate in a lot of stuff, Christoph. So it's just if it's to do with like learning together and as a hive mind, I'm all for it.
Awesome, that's good to hear. So that would be, yeah, an alternative approach would be something like office hours, where you just hang out on Jitsi, wherever regular times people can show up with whatever they're working on and get some practical feedback on those, which is a very different format.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we definitely need to be doing the workshops this year. Some kind of design workshops, whether that's just some kind of design thinking about user flows, all that kind of stuff, or maybe stuff like using the UI kit and the icons kit and projects. Some of those are more high level thinking, some of those are more like very specific technical things, but all of those would be good opportunities to spread good design in Bitcoin.
Yeah, if I can chime in again with the wallet improvement project, but it just fits in with everything we've been talking about. So the whole idea behind that is for us to be able to talk to wallet developers and their communities and figure out on a more high level, like what's the goal of the product, and then we do a little bit of research, and then we define a problem that we want to solve. And then I envision that we can have and this is also in a way a workshop, so a design sprint where we would try to solve that problem, but in a creative way. Hopefully all of us can, for example, if we are trying to solve sending flow or something like that, we can use wallet UI kit, like 5 people ripping that up and just going crazy, suggesting ideas where we would be able to come up with something, and then later test it, prototype it, and maybe come up with a solution. And along the way, also suggest maybe some small fixes. But yeah, it's a lot of goals. I'm not sure if this fits in, and if you guys even like this idea, or if you think that it would take way too much time to organize it. But in my head, it's like a single design sprint of maybe 2 hours where we would try to solve clearly defined 2 to 3 problems related to a wallet, and then maybe suggest some minor improvements along the way as we rip it apart. But maybe it's just wishful thinking. I'm not really a designer, so yeah.
I fully agree with Pavel. Did I pronounce his name correctly?
Yeah, it's Pavle, but you
Pavle.
can call me Pav. Yeah, it's easier.
Pav.
You can call me Pav.
I
Yeah.
think that the information collected from the wallet improvement project could add on so nicely to this. So just fully agree with everything that he said. I think it will add on really nicely if you just manage to tie them together in a way. Because I think like if I don't know, I've never designed a wallet, never even considered designing a wallet, but I would want to know a little bit about the wallets that you guys have reviewed, and then like the common pain points, so that when I'm designing the wallet myself from scratch, I'd be like, oh, okay, so they're showing me the traditional flow here, but by the way, these are some of the most common pain points that users experienced in wallet X, Y, and Z. So yeah, just throwing that out there.
Yeah, the way in which we conducted wallet reviews so far was that we acted on behalf of wallets users. So us, a bunch of Bitcoiners and designers, trying to get in ahead of their users and then making some obvious and some maybe some not so obvious suggestions. But I was targeting or a little bit thinking maybe, and even talking to Roy from Breeze, and he was like, well, you guys aren't really our users, so you're suggesting something that doesn't maybe make sense, and we talk to people and this makes sense to them. So I was trying to see how we can combine that, and maybe doing some sort of usability study for the wallets where we hopefully can get and maybe even put some sats as a bounty for people to earn a little bit of Bitcoin. To help us with the usability studies, where we would have like 5 users testing a wallet for us. Hopefully those users would be personas from the actual wallet, like Breeze wallet has their own type of users that they want to cater, and then we conduct a usability study, define a problem, and then try to solve that problem in a little bit more creative way, like going crazy, ideating and stuff like that, and then maybe getting a little bit more serious and trying to tie things up and suggest it to them. And hopefully then we'll have like a bunch of things to document in the guide. But as I said, it's a big project, so I'm not even sure if this is all possible. So would love to hear some feedback. Like, for example, I never conducted a design review or sprint, sorry. So I'm not really sure if this all makes sense. So would love to hear if Daniel...
In my premature experience, exactly what you said is I took part in 2 hackathons just about 2 months ago. So we had to ideate and design very quickly. And there's a whole, from a practical perspective, I think there's a whole bunch of, is it Figma or Miro? There's a couple of Figma on Miro, it's Miro. There's a couple of Miro templates. I came across one that was used by the Dropbox team. And those templates are actually designed for people to work remotely together in a team, in a design sprint, and they even have built-in timers. So you can just put the timer on and then everyone just does that thing and then done, time's up. So yeah, maybe that helps.
Yeah, that's actually what I thought of, but that would require like experienced facilitator to, be able to manage like 10 people, 15 people on a call. So yes. I'm not really sure. Daniel, or Christoph, or Steven, or Davey, do you have any experience with this? How do you guys envision this? Do you think we'll be able to even pull it off the way I try to envision it, or is it like wishful thinking?
So I think as you mentioned earlier, the previous calls, they were about, we just downloaded the app, clicked around a bit, took some screenshots, talked about it. So the difference, what we could do is, which would be a more proper review, is review the project as a whole For example, Breeze is, I think it's a funded company. They want to have point of sales and podcasts. Compare that to Blixt, which is, I think, a one-person project, a little bit more raw, newer, a bit more open source, probably a smaller community. So, and of course, there are very different standards and expectations and different levels of maturity. And then you have to review them in a very different way. Like a brand new project might have very different struggles. Maybe they need more help picking the right specs, or even maybe they don't even have a brand or a logo. Like a lot of Bitcoin projects that started, it's few developers that got together and built something. They don't have a logo even, or something that somebody just kind of threw together or bought on some website. And then that would require very different focus. So so the point I was trying to make, do we just review the UX of the application or the wallet as a whole? And then what do we try to help? Because that could also be just really different. We might just say we think the website needs a lot of help, or the brand needs help, or whatever.
And in terms of the research side of the UX, from a practical perspective, I'd love to hear. Christoph is smiling as I'm saying this because he knows what I'm about to say. So in terms of the research component, so I've done usability tests, and for the usability test, you can do them remote, that's no problem. But the user, so while you're conducting the test, you're not actually taking any notes. So the test itself can take anywhere from, I guess, half an hour to 45 minutes, and an hour if the user story is more complex. And then after you've actually done the test, the usability test, you're then going to save that as a file, and then you're actually going to watch that file. So for one usability test per user, it's actually 2 hours worth of work, in my experience. But the knowledge that you gain is invaluable. So yeah.
Hey, I'm down for more wallet improvement calls. If you schedule them, I'll show up to them.
Yeah, I think so far the schedule is we have one every 3 weeks, but that's not enough to keep this project going. That needs to be asynchronous work happening, and then the calls every 3 weeks, 3 weekly, whatever you'd call that, tri-weekly. No? That would be more of a catch-up presentation planning type of deal, I think.
Yeah, I mean, Pav, the thing I would think about in terms of people actually building user flows for wallets and stuff like that is just like what the expected result is. Or like, do we hope that the wallets take the flows and implement them? Or is it just, so that we said we did it and we now have an example of, what a better flow might look like? Because we kind of already do that a little bit in a sense that we have these collaborations in the community. And a wallet will come and say they want some design help, and then a couple designers will start working on it, and then after a while some of the projects go very, very well, and the designs get folded in to the actual code base, and sometimes the engagement kind of peters out over a couple months. So I guess it would just kind of depend on how you'd envision these collaborations going. It doesn't matter if they implement the designs or not, or is it just so that we did the work and we have an example of what an improved user flow might be?
Well, the big goal is to also document the improvements that Wallet has made and add them to the case study. So the way I would approach it is maybe just talk to the wallet or product makers and ask them, like, guys, what kind of help do you need? Do you really need like small stuff? Do you really need, because like I've been in open source, it's like maybe 5 years now, and none of the projects I've been involved, they never really focused on conducting usability studies and whatnot. And I think that's the value that we can actually add. And like some minor improvement, just saying you don't have a back button, or you could do this specific thing better, is helpful. But I think this community can go so much beyond those simple things, even though I really think those are also very important. But we can we need to add value that open source projects don't usually have. Like they don't have a designer team, they don't have time to, talk to the users, and they do have like big communities usually, and they're aware of mainly are aware of the problems that there are, but maybe they're missing it from the big picture side of things. So maybe with the usability study, we will actually have the data in a way to show them like, hey guys, yeah, you do need this and that. But also we have not noticed that majority of users is unable to figure out that they need to click here and, request, or one very funny thing that I recently realized with BCC Pay server is that people don't know that they need to scan a QR code. Like invoice appears, QR code appears, and they have no idea what they need to do. And that was like very interesting to me. We never thought that people may not be able to figure out that they need to scan a QR code. So things like that, like high level things, but also trying to connect the dots and maybe make some improvements along the way. And it's very big idea. So that's why I'm asking, do you think it's something that we can do? And like meetings every 3 weeks ideally would be actual design sprints, because I don't think that for other steps we need people involved, because like you need to talk to the wallet developers. Okay, 1 or 2 people from community can do that. We can define problems. We can, help them with personas and things. And afterwards, okay, we can conduct a usability study. You need only 2 people for that. 1 to take notes, 1 to record and lead the interview. So the third part is where we need like community, and that is the actual design sprints, where we would ideally come up with all of these crazy ideas. And afterwards, even that, we don't need that many people again. Like we are done with the design sprints, then we would try to tie things up, prototype, and yeah, but it's all based on theory. I'm not sure if this is how it works in practice. I'm really hoping Daniel maybe has some ideas. I know he's been part of big companies doing design sprints. So is this even viable in our small community? I'm not sure.
Yeah, I'm hearing kind of a couple of different activities being discussed here. Really, I mean, I think the review calls, so far, I think, they have been mostly reviewing projects that wanted to be reviewed, but I think maybe sometimes it has also just been like, hey, we should review this one. They didn't request it, but we'll do it anyway. And they're kind of, a very kind of, not superficial, but they are kind of a starting point. But a lot of what you're talking about now, it's almost like design service, right? Like you're actually kind of offering like, hey, we can be your design team to open source projects that do not have a designer or have, not enough design resource. Someone's done something, right? And that to me is quite a different thing. It's very interesting, basically an open source design service for a particular type of product. But yeah, that's a much deeper offering than just reviewing, right? You're actually saying, we can identify your issues, we'll verify them, and we will develop solutions and test those solutions for you. That's super valuable, right, for these parties. But that to me is a very different thing. So I haven't kind of wrapped my head around yet how it went from the reviews to possibly providing these services and how we did that. I mean, of course we could run sprints. We know how to do that, right? Between this group, I think several people have done it, and it's totally doable online as well. But for who should we do it? And is it a one-time thing, or is it an ongoing service we're offering to say Blix, like which we've done, right? That seems to be an interesting project because it's been very responsive, actually implemented suggestions and changes, doesn't have kind of a team to do this on their own, so it might not get done otherwise. But yeah, I have a lot of questions on like who would we work with?
That's a really good point.
And how long?
I'm hearing Christoph's words in my head, because when I posted my idea onto the forum, his first thing was narrow the lens, narrow the lens, narrow the lens. So I'm almost like that's the thing that's going through my head as Daniel's talking. And then I'm thinking usability, narrow the lens. It almost feels as if Possibly this is more on the UX research side, could be a narrower lens, and then getting the information from the users for those specific wallets and then leaving it there and having the recommendations and just sending those back to whoever the UX research has been done for. So that maybe shortens the process, because the UX process, I don't know, for me is kind of almost 3 stages. So this is kind of just one stage, the initial stage. So yeah.
And the totally opposing thought to just throw that into the mix is that I think open source is a lot about output, about doing things, about making them happen. And I think a lot of projects there's a lot of low-hanging fruit that a competent designer can just come in and, let's say, clean up, if you will. And something that are just, good craft, good execution, where you don't even need to do usability studies. Because it's the way I thought about it before a few times, it's like, if you give something crappy to a person, they're going to say it's crappy. Like, you need to give something good to a person to get good test results. Like, if you think if you know you can still make it better, like, don't test it yet, right? Because it's just not good enough yet. They're going to say the obvious things that you see too. So I think there's kind of a point where usability studies, for example, where they don't make sense yet, because a competent designer or a product person can already see the flaws in it. And then the other part is the output, just to have a real world impact. Is it enough if we just say, hey, here are 10 problems you have? Or should we focus more on the output side of things? Or do we at that point say, hey, community, if there's a designer here who wants to have an impact on a project, here's stuff you can do, and just kind of see if somebody, steps up to the task and and just picks it up. I mean, so I've been helping some projects on the side right now, Bitcoin Core project and Join Market. Bosch has been involved with SUSE. Stephen, you've been involved with SUSE a little bit with Hello Bitcoin also. So some of us are kind of, doing that execution side part on the side already, but it hasn't been part of these main reviews. And I think, Daniel, what you're thinking is maybe that execution becomes part of that process too. I don't know, a bunch of different thoughts here. Now we have a huge mess of thoughts. What do we do?
Yeah, I mean, that's what I got from Pavel, and I think it's a good idea. And like you say, this community have been doing it, just not in a kind of it hasn't been marketed as we'll do it for you. We've been jumping in. So I don't really know how to summarize this, but again, I think coming back to, like, if we take one step, we might figure out what the step after that will be. So maybe we don't kind of take too much in one bite here.
So this goes back to a point that I brought up, I think, when we did the first wallet improvement project. You reminded me of this, Daniel, and you first commented on this. And this is just a point I was making, that, they're a company. And I think Steve chimed into that conversation too, and, pointed out that, we should be contributing to open source, even if, it's a company that's making money, which makes sense, because any kind of Lightning wallet is probably going to have some kind of monetization aspect, providing some kind of Lightning service or something to that effect, right? But there is definitely a difference between, like, a Lightning wallet that has, like, venture capital versus a Lightning wallet that's just a single person. And we do need to be cautious, I think, about just, like, marketing it as, like, Bitcoin design communities, like the decentralized design firm for all Lightning wallets. There's a limit. There's a limit to the kind of capacity that we can put out, and we can't spread ourselves out. I wouldn't want to spread ourselves out too thin by just saying that, we'll do unlimited usability testing and unlimited design for all these different wallets. Because if you turn that around and say, well, like, why doesn't some developer community just become the outsourced unit and integration testing firm for all open source Lightning projects, because they'd eventually run out of capacity, right? And so it's the same with our work, I think. I mean, we should be helping out open source projects and helping them out with their design and giving guidance wherever we can. But there's kind of a threshold I think you cross to where you become like an ongoing collaboration. And I'm not sure that like the kind of like focus that say Bosch puts into, Zeus or something like that, like you're not necessarily always going to get that just by saying that, having the whole community focus on doing usability testing for any Lightning wallet out there is going to be as effective an approach. So, yeah, I guess I have a tangle of thoughts here that I need to unwind too. But I mean, if I had to summarize, I'd just say that we just need to be cautious about just, marketing unlimited usability testing, and just make sure we have some kind of criteria for, what we will do and, what we won't do and all that.
I do have to speak about usability tests. And Christopher's smiling because I've seen this in other calls as well. Yeah, he's gonna start calling me usability. No, I'm pretty interested personally in the research part of UX. And around about 2 months ago, I was I was on a live Twitter call, and the head of design for Coinbase was talking about how he perceives the future of, he was specifically talking about wallets. And he said that moving on into the future, a lot of the companies are going to start investing heavily in UX research. And today I just typed 3 keywords in. I typed in UX research cryptocurrency. There was the number of jobs online was like almost nothing. And that can be a specific defined role in a company as opposed to just a UX designer. So I do really think that that's possibly a neglected area, and maybe it's not known yet, but yeah, I do think that considering the number of jobs that were available with that specific design term, search term. So yeah.
One small thing I think could be immediately valuable to the community is to keep building a joint reference library, which I think if you just did a review of any product, there would be many screenshots you could take, right? Like, but it's always interesting to see, oh, what's the onboarding like, or what's the home screen like. It tells a lot about the use case for the product. And then of course there's well, what's the send and receive flow? And today, still to this day, whenever I need to know, I kind of go and do that myself for a number of products. And I imagine that through all these review calls we've had so far, which I have unfortunately not been part of very many, and I apologize for that. Try to do better. But that seems like an immediate, fairly simple thing. We could, although Figma makes it harder than it should be, to collaborate on files these days. But if we had just a file that said, here is the reference library, or review whatever, review database or something, that would be valuable, just simply as it is, without even proposing any improvements. And then, of course, we will, but that seems like it's fairly low effort, but good reward.
Yeah, that goes to documenting what Pavel and Alex was saying earlier, documenting these in kind of wrap-ups, which we haven't done a good job at so far. But that's kind of the point of rethinking what these wallet reviews are like and what we want to get out of them. And just like any good design process, in the middle, there's always a mess, and that's where we are right now. And then we'll come up with, and the phoenix will rise.
Yeah, Just one quick thought about why I'm trying to bring in this big picture to open source wallet makers is that usually in open source it starts as one guy having fun and doing something just because he likes it. So he doesn't have like a clear idea of what is it that he wants to do. Then a few more people come in and community joins, and then you have people who are opinionated and they need certain features. So features just keep getting added and added and added, and you don't. Open source people usually forget like what is it that we are doing. At this point, they're just having fun, with their wallet with tons of features, and this is why people then complain. Well, open source is cool, but UX sucks, and you cannot do this. It has way too many things, and the reason why I'm like very insisting of us like just asking question. Okay, what is it that your wallet is trying to do? Okay, onboard people easily. So how do we do that? Like, okay, let's try to find pain points and then like really think in a creative way how we can solve it so that we can bring in that like big company processes into open source. That's just, and I fully agree with you guys that we need to solve like so many easy problems that there are out there. So I think that just by asking like wallet developer, like, are you at what stage is your product? Okay, beginning, Flex wallet. Okay, then maybe we can just provide some simple UX from our point of view, and we don't need a usability study yet. Maybe in a year we will, or in 6 months we will, do it again. But there are maybe some established wallets out there that are ready and think that they're doing okay. So maybe we can, talk to them and then do usability studies for them. So I think it, as you guys mentioned, just to summarize all things that we said, is that we really need to talk to people and figure out like, okay, how we can help them, how they can help us, how we can help their users and their, so ideally it will be messy at first, but hopefully, as Daniel, I think, pointed out, step by step, and we will figure it out. So like one actionable thing that we can do is just think of a wallet that we want to do in the future, and then maybe I and a few other people who are interested, maybe we can reach out to the developer, have a call, maybe even record it and just ask questions like, what is it that you guys are trying to do? Are there any things that you specifically need help? And then maybe provide some of the suggestions that we have. So yeah, one step at a time. Lots of things to do, and maybe a mission impossible, but as always, we will do it.
Yeah, keep it simple. And I also think that after reviewing 5 or 6 wallets, certain similarities will just pop up, and it's going to be more efficient, and we'll also figure out kind of what's in it for us and what's in it for them. Like how, what we can learn and add to the guide or to our own repositories, whatever, and how we can help them in the best way. It's just kind of need to start doing sometimes.
Exactly what Christoph said. If you do 5 usability tests on 5 wallets, if you do usability tests on each wallet and you do 5, you'll get a lot of similarities. So yeah.
Well, kudos, Pavel. You shouldn't feel deflated because you kicked off this whole thing, and I think you're absolutely right. By trying to reach out to projects instead of just waiting for them to come and read the very long design guide, right? So I think you've done really well.
And ideally, for every project we come up with, we don't even have to say anything. We just have to paste a link to the design guide, and it perfectly answers every question.
Magic.
Exactly.
Well, I'm going to have to jump off soon, guys, but it's been really nice to see you again in 2022.
Yes, good call. Time to wrap it up. It's been over an hour. I'm going to stop the recording here now. Clicking the button.